so funny. With the paper part sticking out and everything. Oh yeah. In the middle. Yeah, that's wrong. Do you think this has been here since town council was made? I wonder. I wonder if it was like a gift, like somebody like made it and gave it to someone's grandma. Yes, definitely.
Welcome to the 2023 Candidates Forum, sponsored by Wallingford Community Women in conjunction with Wallingford Governmental Media. I'm Kathy Shavy, the program moderator. This segment features the candidates running for mayor. The format will be as follows. The first part of the program will consist of questions asked of the candidates by two reporters from the Record Journal and students from Sheehan High School. They are Kate Ramuni, Wallingford reporter, and Lau Guzman, reporter for the Latino Communities Reporting Lab. The Sheehan High School students will be taking turns asking questions, and they are Leah Butts, Supriya Sarkar, and Austin Di Pasquale. The second part will allow each candidate to make a closing statement. During the question and answer portion of the program, each candidate will have 3 minutes to respond to a question. The opposing candidate will be allowed 1 minute for rebuttal. To conclude the program, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make closing remarks. Prior to the program, a flip of a coin determined the order of questioning. Before beginning the questioning, I'd like to introduce the candidates running for mayor. They are Vincent Cervoni, Republican, and Riley O'Connell, Democrat. Ms. Ramuni, will you ask your first question of Mr. Cervoni?
As the town's first new mayor in 40 years, what will be your top priorities?
Hello, Kate.
Hi.
Well, you know, I've thought a lot about what my first 90 days are going to be. We're going to get to work on our technological improvements right away. We're going to spread technology throughout Town Hall to make Town Hall operate more efficiently. We are going to also work on our website to improve interactivity between the town and its residents and businesses. We're going to improve our online bill pay system. The system we have right now is not really very good. I'd like to see us have our own online bill pay system for all utilities and taxes. We're going to work on getting employees tracked digitally as opposed to using paper time cards, and that will help us work towards the direct deposit we keep hearing about. In addition, we're going to review buildings, streets, sidewalks, and parks, and we're going to look to see where we can make improvements, looking towards modernizing where appropriate, and we will also be sure that something like Community Pool Park receives some type of significant review approach and potentially repurpose. If not, I do hear strong sentiment towards continuing to use the park as a pool. So those are the things that I'd like to address, certainly within the first 90 days that I'm in office, and get balls rolling in as many directions as possible to get things moving in a terrific direction. Thank you.
Mr. O'Connell?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you to the Wallingford Community Women for putting on this forum tonight. I agree with a lot of that. But the issue is that most of those things should have been done years ago. I mean, we talk about infrastructure. It's a priority, and yet Mr. Cervoni voted against the committee that is doing that exact thing, analyzing where these issues are. Certainly in terms of technology, direct deposit should have been done decades ago. Online bill pay should have been done years ago. These are quality of life improvements, and they also save the taxpayers a ton of money. And another priority of mine that I vowed to do in the first 100 days is put out a job offer and to hire a full-time professional grant writer. Because one of the things that Wallingford has been way behind the 8 ball in has been competing for grants with the rest of the state. I mean, there's all this money left in Hartford that's not trickling down to Wallingford. Cheshire just got $500,000 for their community pool. Southington got $500,000 for their new athletic field. We just built a new athletic field. We didn't get any funding because we didn't apply. We're not just getting it, we're not applying. So those are my priorities, certainly, right away.
Ms. Guzman, would you ask your next question of Riley?
When the town received the $13.5 million from the federal government in ARPA funds, it chose to award half of the grants to small businesses and nonprofits and use the rest for municipal projects. What municipal projects would you like to see that money go towards?
Thank you for that question, because that's going to be very important. Who sits in that mayor's office, what determines when we go forward with that. First and foremost, we have to acknowledge the reality. The way ARPA was handled was a disaster. You know, our town was gifted this $13.5 million to not just recover from the pandemic, but really take that next step forward. And we waited years longer than other towns that have far more bigger budgets to deal with than we do. And when we finally did choose to give half that money, more or less, to businesses and nonprofits, what I think was absolutely the right decision, we went about it in the complete wrong way. I mean, we have 2,300 businesses in town, and we are still completely incapable. We still have an EDC does not have an active email list for all these businesses, so we failed to properly and fairly and equitably distribute that money, because many of the businesses, I walked business to business. I spoke to 900 business owners over the course of that time that application first went out, which is still a fraction of the business owners. And yet, most of the ones I spoke to, one, did not know the money existed, and two, didn't even know the PPP money existed, which was another $160 million beforehand. That's our job as a town, to notify these small business owners who already have more than a full hands to deal with their own business and families and everything else, to make sure we are there as a partner with them to work their way forward. When it comes to the money that's left, I'd love to see a large part of that go towards community pool. And this is, I guarantee you, this is already becoming a point of frustration tonight. It's going to continue to be. Because this pool would be open today, would have been open years ago, if Mr. Cervoni was not the tie-breaking vote to kill that project twice. Twice. And so to say that you're for the pool now is it's far past disingenuous. And I think with the people that use the pool, look, I partially learned how to swim at the pool. When I was 16, that was my first job in town, was being a lifeguard at the pool. And we thought we were the big shots because we made 10 cents above minimum wage. But this was, and can continue to be, an emphasis on community. That's the first word in that community pool phrase, obviously. And so I'd love to see the money go towards that, because that money was initially allocated to not make whole, but help people that were disproportionately affected by the pandemic, and people that might be middle to lower income, people that are less likely to have pools, right? And at a time where obviously it's getting hotter and hotter every summer, pools are becoming more and more valuable. That option's been gone. This was an outdoor facility. We're looking for more outdoor, socially distant spots at that point in the pandemic, and it's just been closed ever since. So I'd love to see the majority, if not all that money, at least chip away at what the cost of that pool is, because it is going to cost more now because we waited. And that's an unfortunate reality. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about my record tonight. The community pool vote came up during COVID, when we were in completely uncertain times and had no idea that the pool might reopen. I'd love to talk about my opponent's record, but I can't because he doesn't have one. So that being said, what would I do with municipal project money from ARPA? We have roofs on buildings that need to be replaced. We will do that. We have improvements to siding of buildings that need to be replaced. We have playscapes, other parks in town that could use attention. We have sidewalks in downtown that are frequently walked and frequently beaten up during snow removal that could use extra attention. There are plenty of municipal projects where we can send ARPA, and I look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Ms. Butts, will you ask your next question of Vinnie?
Recently, there has been a lot of commotion based on the proposal of the 2 public high schools in town unifying as one. How do you feel about Sheehan and Lyman Hall combining into one high school?
So the decision whether or not to consolidate high schools, I see as an educational decision, and that's what the Board of Ed does. They make educational decisions. And I'm not going to pretend to substitute my judgment for theirs. I've been told and I've been given many good reasons as to why education would improve in this town if we could consolidate to one high school. my challenge with what was proposed to us, first of all, it was at the Lyman Hall campus. I am concerned that that neighborhood wouldn't deal well with doubling traffic during school start and school ending. I also, I hosted that meeting where the Board of Ed, or chaired it rather, where the Board of Ed presented, and there was a lot of sentiment in the room against it. I wish that there was more work to build a public consensus about consolidating high schools. I think it needs to be sold to the public. One of my further frustrations is that, this is a circa $200 million project where we'd have to spend about $128 million, and we'd have to bond for that. That's, without paying interest, which we're going to have to do, that's $6 million a year paid back over 20 years. Before we're going to do that, before we're going to impose that on the annual tax burden, I think it'd be appropriate to show us some savings in the annual operations of the Board of Ed. You would think that combining two schools into one, that we could make a reduction in the Board of Education budget. And as it was presented to us, there was not going to be savings in the Board of Education budget. So I do think it's a Board of Ed decision. What was presented to us was hard to support. And the support comes from, the administration and the council who have to decide to fund it. So before I think that the mayor's office and I think the council will agree to support and fund that project, I think the Board of Ed has some work to do to solve the location issues, convince parents that, consolidating schools does give their children an improved educational experience. And I really want to see a greater effort to have some annual operational savings, reducing the Board of Education budget come out of that consolidation. Thank you, Leah.
Riley?
Well, yeah, I believe the question was also how we felt and what we'd like to see done. And personally, and I've said this very publicly from the start, I am not in favor of the one high school project, but it is a process issue. The Board of Ed obviously has a large role to play. But what we can't afford to do is continue to kick the can down the road and not invest in our schools. And while Mr. Savoni's welcome to attack the fact that I don't have a record, a bad record's far worse than that. And he's on record just this most recent budget, cutting the Board of Ed's requested budget by over $2 million, which was threatening to cut every para-educator, I believe, in the second grade. They've adjusted that, but this is what we're talking about. Our school ranking is sinking every year. It's sunk significantly over the last 14 years. So we need to reinvest in whether it's one high school. I'd prefer that it's renovating the two high schools as new, but there's no way around it. It's going to cost money, but it's investment into the future of this town. There is no more worthy of a cause than investing in the future of this town. And that needs to be crystal clear. Thank you.
Mr. Mooney, will you ask your next question of Riley?
There's been a lot of talk in the last year about the safety at town parks since the playscape at Doolittle was set on fire. Do you believe town parks are safe?
That's a great question. Thank you for that, Kate. No, I do not think our town parks are safe, but it's for a multitude of reasons. I think when you look at the situation in Doolittle, I'm constantly impressed by our current police chief, Chief Ventura. I think he's been very proactive about trying to address the issues when it comes to these younger groups, right? And not just for the risk to the property and other people, but to themselves. And when it came to the case of Doolittle, there were pleas from the police department almost a full year before the incident happened when that playscape was burned to the ground to put cameras in that park. Not just for the safety of other attendees, but like I said, for the safety of these children themselves. And it was rejected by the administration and not followed up with the town council. And then after the fact, the administration went on the record saying, no, we decided we're going to do it already, but we just haven't installed it yet. That is fundamentally not true. And so we have to be honest about, again, how we're getting into these situations. The other real safety hazard with the parks, in addition to, making sure our police force has the resources, the technology they need to be in more places at once, is the parks themselves, right? When we talk about infrastructure, our parks are in pretty dire straits. We've seen that in this chamber when the Town Building Maintenance Committee reported on it. And it's not just aesthetic issues, it's real safety issues. You have widowmaker branches hanging over park benches where people, children, families sit. I mean, it's across the board. There are a lot of serious concerns with these parks, and it's beyond just safety, it's also how we present ourselves as a town. I mean, I see a lot of people here tonight that I know for a fact also participated in youth sports in this town. I was big into youth soccer. I still play soccer now. And that was one of the ways we advertised our town, whether it was the Twist tournament or whether it was just having a traveling team come to our, at the time, beautiful Vietnam soccer fields or Woodhouse soccer fields. And a lot of these properties have been neglected for so long that, I mean, when I ran 2 years ago, I had 3 parents come up to me during the campaign to say, hey, we had a soccer tournament at Vietnam soccer fields, and all the parents from both teams had to take off their shoes to mark the lines because the town failed to buy enough paint to cover the lines on the field. I mean, that was an embarrassing way that we presented ourselves to the town. Community pool is a park as well, which amongst safety concerns, there's a lot of issues. So I don't want to see the parks closed down, which is what usually happens when these issues are brought to attention. I want to see them addressed. I want to see them, a plan to address them in the near and immediate future, and make sure that going forward, we maintain them. Because it's not like overnight they became like this. They slowly deteriorated over the course of decades. And we can't allow that to happen again once we rebuild them. Thank you.
Vinny?
So I was in the chambers when that presentation was made. I was also in the chambers when the risk manager was brought in and the parks were reviewed with the risk manager. And by and large, while there were some real aesthetic issues, there were not significant safety issues, and many of the issues that were on screen had been addressed by the time we revisited them. I think that by and large, we could use to improve the way we address town parks. It's not something that the council has been holding up. When it comes to the safety at Doolittle, there was a significant issue about getting a dedicated fiber cable to the park. That's not something that you can just snap a finger and do. That requires lines to be run and poles to be used, and then it all has to be hooked up. To say that government can snap its fingers and solve every problem instantly is kind of unreasonable. Thank you.
Ms. Guzman, would you ask your next question of Vinny?
What kind of infrastructure improvements do you think are needed to town buildings? If elected mayor, where would you start?
I want to look everywhere. I mean, I'm very aware of what we need here in Town Hall. So slated to be done is the roof project. Once the roof is completed, we'll be able to look at Town Hall from the roof down. We'll have solved leaking issues that we may have. And then this Town Hall was beautiful when it was first opened 35 years ago, give or take. It needs some modernizing. The SCOW building that used to be the electric division, I know that's slated for the masonry to be improved. Also on the docket is the train station. We're going to be budgeting to look at the train station, the exterior, the roof. We've had discussions recently about repurposing that. That will also accelerate the improvements to it. I do think, I ride a bicycle with really skinny tires. And I ride in and out of Wallingford, and I get to compare us to other towns on those skinny tires. I think we do a pretty good job with roads, particularly roads that lead in and out of our towns to other towns. I think we could do better. I think we could be more aggressive about our road paving schedule. We have a zone schedule for the sidewalks that I don't think works well because I don't think we've circulated the whole town for sidewalk improvements. Like I said before, I would like to prioritize downtown and high traffic sidewalks. We have too many parts of sidewalks that are capped with asphalt as temporary repairs. We have too many sidewalks that are surging because of tree roots. Those are the things that I think we could certainly improve upon, and I would like to address those as reasonably quickly as possible. I'd like to assemble a 5-year plan where we look at all the things we need to do, and like we've done with school improvement projects in the past, we could put out a bonding package and see that, there's this group of infrastructure improvements that we can make and have it paid for very gradually and have a low impact to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Riley?
So I realize no one here can see what I can see up here. There's a reason the balcony's closed, because this is what years, decades of neglect looks like when you had a beautiful town building and now you have these seats that are so unsafe people can't even go up there. And so one of my priorities for infrastructure would certainly be this building. I think it's a disgrace what this building's turned into. Some of the ceiling has fallen down during meetings in this very chamber. Beyond that, I mean, there's video of it. If you don't trust me, you can look it up yourself. It's entertaining, if nothing else. Beyond that, the old train station, we have employees, town employees working there. It's incredibly unsafe, the conditions. The senior center, and this is the other thing, we have to be proactive as opposed to reactive. We have this beautiful senior center, but because the gutters haven't been cleaned, the gutters haven't been emptied, the roof is starting to fail. There's water that's getting clogged up there. Spending $1 today to maintain what we already have as opposed to 10 tomorrow to replace it entirely is fundamentally what has to be changed in how this town is run. And that's what I promise to do. Thank you.
Ms. Sarkar, would you ask your next question of Riley?
Thank you. Mayor Dickinson is stepping down from office after 40 years. Do you wish to serve as mayor for an extended period of time, or do you have other political ambitions?
Well, I can promise you one thing. I will not be the next 40-year mayor. I will not be the next 20-year mayor. And, you know, I think folks in our generation can relate to this more than maybe some others. You know, I grew up in this town with having most of my representation being the same people my entire life. And I think regardless of party, almost every one of us can agree that the biggest challenges our country face, in addition to money in politics, which is a separate issue, is term limits. The lack thereof at the national level has caused most of our issues. And here in Wallingford, I think is a great example where, you know, when Mayor Dickinson first came in office 40 years ago with at least some sort of medium-term plan, things didn't go half bad. You know, we brought our tax rate down to one of the lowest in the state for a period of time, kept up with our other issues. But once that plan ran out, you can almost see the exact date. We've had 18 straight years of tax increases. Our infrastructure is crumbling. And so what I would love to see in a charter revision, I believe this following year will be state statute, a year to potentially open our town charter. I'd love to see it codified in the town charter that mandates, at the very least for the top office, for mayor, term limits, because it prevents that sort of stagnation and failure to adapt from happening again. But what I can personally vow as well is that I will not overstay my welcome. Whether that's, my goal is, if I'm so fortunate to serve as long, would certainly be the max of 12 years. But it's up to if it's less than that, if the council and the Charter Revision Committee decide that it's fewer years as the term limit, fine. But we have to draw that line somewhere. And all the issues we're going to talk about tonight have been the direct result of really those last 20 years. And there's no reason that when we talk about these really existential issues facing our country and our state, and states across the country for that matter today, Wallingford should be the leading example in the same way that we were 100 plus years ago when we created our first elected division. It was the second in all the Northeast, and we're still benefiting from it today. We should be the town that is the beacon of responsible governance, and that means putting term limits. And I'll point this out as well. There is probably no one who has run for mayor in the recent history of this town who is at more of a disincentive to install term limits than I am, I should say, because I'm going to live hopefully quite a bit longer than 12 years from now. But it's just not appropriate. It's not in the best interest of the community for someone to be a career mayor anywhere. And Wallingford is an exception in many ways, but not in that way. And so I hope that we can make that happen. Thank you for that great question.
Vinny?
You know, I'm glad I'm not the initial answer of that question because I really can't talk about it for 3 minutes. I'm 55 years old. You know, my age, it's just biologically impossible for me to be here for 40 years. So that's not even on my radar screen. And I do want to look at retirement when I'm young and healthy and can travel. It's something that my wife and I really enjoy doing. You know, in terms of what can happen in charter change and all those other things, that's really up to the council. It's not something the mayor gets to dictate. If the electorate wants term limits, they can make that decision. They were presented with a charter in 2008, I think, that would have made some changes to the structure of the government, and that was rejected by the electorate. But, you know, Riley is running for Connecticut according to his second handout, so, you know, I guess we are going to be a stepping stone for him.
Ms. Ramouni, would you ask your next question of Vinnie?
Since adult use cannabis has been legalized in the state of Connecticut, do you think the town should relax its zoning regulations to allow sales here?
So that's an interesting question. And I think it's a question for the values of this community. You know, I guess recreational cannabis is working out okay so far. I had concerns when the legislature legalized it because it was a horse that got out of the barn before it was well trained. I mean, the law says that if a police officer pulls over a car and smells cannabis, that he can't use that as probable cause to test the driver. And that notwithstanding, we don't have a breathalyzer for cannabis. So the use presents some safety issues. And again, so the question becomes, what are the community values with respect to something like cannabis and the production of it? You know, I think our Planning and Zoning Commission quickly addressed the issue and decided that, you know, we didn't want a cannabis production facility in this town. Cannabis production facilities require high security. And there are concerns. I mean, we're living in a time when crime, you know, throughout the region has increased. You know, while Wallingford is, according to SafeWise, the 5th safest town in Connecticut, which is something to be proud of, you have to be concerned about the impact of something like cannabis production coming into town and the type of crime having a facility like that, you know, a facility that requires such high security might attract. So I think the present state of things reflects the community values in Wallingford, and that can change certainly as cannabis use becomes more acceptable and more socialized for certain. So I really think it's a question of the town's community values and whether or not we do want to see that come into our town. Thank you.
Riley?
Well, I apologize for taking 3 minutes to answer a question on term limits, but you took 3 minutes to not answer any question on cannabis. It's simple. No, it's important because Wallingford, for a long period of time, had the most liquor stores per capita in the state of Connecticut. And so to draw the line here at a business opportunity that, one, it's better regulated under our own roof than elsewhere because our neighboring towns are allowing it. It's legal in the state, and this might be news, but you don't need a passport to cross over to Meriden and North Haven. We are missing out. We talk about being a business-friendly town. This is an example of how we are failing to do that, arbitrarily choosing where to draw those lines. So absolutely, I'd be in favor of it. It'd be a benefit to the town, and it's already, all the studies prove that having it here versus in Meriden and Hamden is not going to change use. That's the bottom line as well. Thank you.
Ms. Guzman, will you ask your next question of Riley?
If elected, what would you like to see happen to the Armory building after the police department moves to its new headquarters? Do you support moving the adult education program there? Would you support selling it?
That's a great question. So, a couple of different answers there. To start with adult ed, because I think that's kind of what's going to trigger what we do with everything going forward. I'm certainly not in favor of moving adult ed from its current location unless we can find a better or equal, at the very least, location for them to go. I've talked a lot already tonight about how our schools are struggling in a variety of ways, but a highlight, a diamond of our education system here in Wallingford is our adult ed program. And these are folks that are already often left out of the political process, neglected in other ways. This is an important program that we offer, and that has to be first and foremost. Now, if it turns out that the Armory could work for that opportunity, because it has to be somewhere based downtown, then I would absolutely be open to that. I think the Board of Ed, the study that's come out so far by the Board of Ed, I believe tried to combine both the administrative offices, the Board of Education, and adult ed in that building, and that did not work. So one or the other, I'd be open to that idea. I certainly wouldn't be in favor of selling it unless someone came and offered us $1 billion for it. I don't see that building really being all that lucrative of a deal in the first place because of all the work that needs to go into it. And it's a historic building. I mean, it's in the center of our downtown. So I've heard other suggestions by members of the council, by members of our police force about potentially making a portion of that building basically a smaller outlet office for the police to have a presence still in the downtown. I'd be open to that idea as well. And that's something that you could pair with the administrative offices of the Board of Ed. Not so much adult ed. Adult education should be kept as its own valuable resource and valuable thing to be proud of in this town. The last thing I'll say is, say we do move forward, and we're speaking even more hypotheticals here. Say we do move forward with developing that building in a commercial sense, in the same way that's being discussed right now about our old train station. What needs to change across government in Wallingford, across government, is transparency. We cannot be picking and choosing winners and losers from within the administration to fill these spots and get more, lucrative deals. These things need to go to RFP. It needs to be an open, transparent process, not just that the public can have a say, but, I worked at the antitrust division. When you don't have an open process, that's when the consumers, in this case, the residents of the town, are being ripped off. This is how you make sure that the free market works, right? Is that it is open to all. And so if we do go down that route, I want to make sure it's done the right way. Thank you.
Vinny?
So a challenge to selling that building is that, all the other factors aside, is that the radio tower is there for our emergency communications. And that's certainly a complicating factor, and it needs to be considered. I do believe that there are a variety of town uses that can be considered. Certainly adult education could be there because it does have proximity to public transportation, and I think that's important for the success of adult education. And whether it's adult education or the Board of Education offices, we could also, similar to the train station, consider some public use of the building, some privatized business use of the building. It does have a certain allure to it that could make it interesting for those variety of uses. Thank you.
Mr. Di Pasquale, will you ask your question to Vinny?
What is one value that you hope to instill within the Wallingford community as mayor?
So I moved to this town 30 years ago, just short of 30 years ago, and immediately became a fan. We lived in the next town growing up. This was one of the towns we came to for commerce, because in Northford we didn't have a lot. So I think that a value easily instilled in members of this community would be pride for all the things that are good about this town. I mean, we have tremendous school spirit between our two high schools, as we've learned very well this year. There is a history here that we learned about during the 350 2 years later, or we were reminded of. Many of us are cognizant, many of us have friends of families that have settled the town. So there's a tremendous history here. There is a tremendous business community, business presence that makes this a great place to live, because those businesses pay tremendous taxes and help reduce the mill rate, so that this is a very, very reasonable place to live. So I can probably go on if I keep thinking about things that there are to be proud of in this town. We have history, we have business, we have, we hear about the school rivalry, but that's a spirit that really permeates the community for so many different reasons. We have a tremendous number of youth athletic leagues in this town, historical societies. So I would say it's pride. I think Wallingford is a great place to live, and it's a great place to be proud to live in and be from. Thank you.
Riley?
So I think this community is already full of pride, so I wouldn't need to instill it. I think it's already here. I'm certainly proud to be born and raised in this town. You know, fifth generation Wallingford. I wouldn't still be here if my family didn't love and appreciate this town very much. You know, in many ways, another great value that Wallingford already has is looking after each other. Oftentimes, sometimes the administration in the town fails to look after the town itself. When we had that microburst or Hurricane Sandy, there were Facebook groups made literally for neighbors to communicate with neighbors when they needed something, when they were in need of aid, and that's amazing. And it is not necessarily unique to Wallingford, but it is more here. It is better here. In terms of what I would like to instill is more in the town hall perspective, in the administration perspective, and that's a level of integrity and transparency. And I think for a variety of reasons, we are failing in that regard. And being the next mayor, hopefully, that's something that is within my power to instill, because the community is perfect, the administration needs a lot of work. Thank you.
Ms. Rumani, will you ask your next question of Riley?
The town falls under state statute 8-30G because it has less than 10% deed-restricted affordable housing. Should the town try to attract more development of that type in order to meet that threshold, and how could that be done?
Absolutely. This is, again, a problem that's not necessarily unique to Wallingford, but it's worse here. As Kate just said, the state sets a goal of each municipality aiming to have 10% non-market rate housing. Wallingford, I believe, right around now is around 4.2, maybe 4.3, which is well short of that. And this statute's been around since the 80s, early 90s. I mean, it's been around for a long time. And we have failed to make any substantial, measurable progress. And it's a crisis. There's no other way to phrase it. There is no non-market rate housing. There's not even any housing beyond the non-market rate. There's not even housing that would, in a common sense term, be considered affordable. And it's making it incredibly difficult for all sorts of people in this community. You have folks, especially when it comes to senior housing. Wallingford has one of the oldest average age populations in Connecticut. And of course, a large part of that is because we're home to a great facility like Masonic Care, but there's nowhere, as great as Masonic Care is, it's not affordable for most people. And so finding places for seniors to safely move to, as opposed to staying in houses that they might not be able to navigate safely anymore, whether it's a 2 or 3 story building. We see this now when you talk to our first responders, and you see, you know, a 60% increase in the calls over the past couple of years that the police and fire have had to respond to. Many of these calls, if not close to the majority, are responding to either minor to more medium emergencies for seniors, simply because, again, they're not necessarily in a safe environment. So finding and adding more specifically, whether it's public or public-private partnership, adding more non-market rate housing, especially senior housing, is very important to a priority of mine. On the other end of the spectrum, not just the seniors, Wallingford, and this is one of the things that inspired me to run in the first place back in 2021. The most recent census demonstrated that we had, and I know Mr. Stoney disagrees with anecdotally, but there's a difference between opinion and fact. And the fact of the matter is that Wallingford had a 15% decline in young families living in this town from 2010 to 2020 because there's nowhere to go. I rented when I first came back to Wallingford. You cannot afford to buy a house, most people in my generation. That's scary, especially when Wallingford has fundamentally always been a generational town. My grandparents grew up here. They raised my mother, who then raised me. And I would love to raise a family here one day as well, but it's hard to even conceptualize that for most people because affordability is a huge issue. So adding non-market rate housing, but beyond that, and having a plan to do so, but beyond that, trying to rein in these tax increases so that Wallingford become what it once was, what was once our strong suit, an affordable town for families and everyone else. Thank you.
Vinny?
So the way 8-30G is written is it creates this threshold, and if you don't get to that 10% threshold, then somebody files an application to do development for affordable housing under the statute, and the Planning and Zoning Commission virtually can't reject the proposal. There is something to be said about the fact that if housing is not falling under the 830G statutory definition, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily unaffordable. Those calculations are not necessarily for low-income housing. They could apply to median income housing. So in my time on the council, I have certainly supported the transportation-oriented development that's going on around the train station, and also the incentive housing zone overlay. So I have taken the opportunity to support housing development that will get us closer to that 10% threshold where 830G doesn't necessarily give somebody the opportunity to shove a project
Thank you.
through. Thank you.
Ms. Guzman, will you ask your next question of Vinnie?
There have been problems hiring town employees, both at Town Hall and the Electric Division. Low wages have been cited as a reason. Would you support increasing the wages to attract and retain employees, especially at the Electric Division?
So employee retention is very important. I think we would all agree something like the Electric Division is, it's a jewel in our crown, and we still have a very reliable and affordable electric system in this town, and it's something we should certainly work to preserve. Recently, I worked with Hubcap downtown, and we put together a job fair where we had the Electric Division, the Water Sewer Division, Police, Fire, Public Works. I think that's it. They came and they presented opportunities for people to apply for jobs. We had the room beyond seating capacity. I think 100 people showed up. So I do support recruitment to help fill those positions. I think if you look through my history, there have been at least 2 contracts, police and fire, which came before us, and they included a general wage adjustment that trued up those 2 departments with competitive departments in the area. And I think you can certainly do something like that given the opportunity. I have to be careful as a member of the town council to talk about a contract that may come before us while I'm still there. But I certainly would support a contract that did provide better opportunities for employee retention. Certainly as mayor, I would look at all the contracts as they came before us. You can only address a lot of these conditions when the contract is up for renewal. So some will happen during this mayor's term and some will not happen during this mayor's term. But given the opportunity, I would certainly look at what it is that the town can afford to do to keep employees and not put us in a position where we're losing them to other communities, or in the case of the Electric Division, to private employers. And I think that our Electric Division is certainly well enough run and robust that we could probably look at an employee retention program without having a significant impact upon the rates that people are paying. I think it's incredibly important that while we maintain reliability with employee retention, that we also look at what we're paying employees so that we can certainly not lose them to private industry. Thank you.
Riley?
So I also stopped by and attended that job fair, and it was great, it was packed. But why was it the first time, Mr. Cervoni, that you organized this fair after being on the council for 14 years? This retention issue has been ongoing, it's been getting worse year after year, and waiting to do it when it's politically opportunistic is one thing, but this should be a consistent job fair to address these issues. And reality is, if you actually speak to the men and women that work for this great town, it's not just the wages. If anything, the wages are actually not even necessarily the biggest thing. It's the pension options and the health benefits that have been slashed over the last 7 or so years. And these are the advantages that we're supposed to have as a municipality over these private industries in other towns. And we've left these town employees, and sometimes, if you look at linemen, these are folks that risk their lives. They're doing the second most dangerous job in the country, and they're not even getting paid a competitive wage. They're on an expired contract from 2019. This is unacceptable, and we have to start treating our employees with the humanity and dignity that they deserve.
Ms. Butts, will you ask your next question of Riley?
Will you put into place a robust and functional internet service website for Town Hall that includes bill pay and submission of questions? How do you envision these changes will affect the town budget?
Yes. No, I'm kidding. It's the number one thing I hear. In my campaign, we've knocked on over 13,000 doors in this point, and it may not be the most important issue to people, but it's the first one that comes out of their mouth because it's so common sense, right? I mean, online bill pay, having our own system, so it's actually reasonably cost-effective to do so, great. And all the studies of towns, even though they're decades old, because every town has already done this a long time ago, all the studies that have shown that transition going on have ultimately more or less canceled out in terms of savings, because people more consistently pay their bills on time, which gives the town money earlier, it's more valuable that way, etc. Direct deposit, to me, the fact that that's gone on as long as it has is a disgrace. Because not only is it a convenience thing, and not only is it a quality of life thing for our employees, for our taxpayers, it's a lose-lose. Because right now, the town pays an estimated, the taxpayer should say, pays an estimated $200,000 to $300,000 a year to run these antiquated systems. Because not only do you have to buy the paper checks, not only do we have to buy the stamps for all the folks on pension and all of our 1,500 or so employees, we also, built into some of these town contracts, as it should be, have built in 30 minutes paid leave for employees to go pick up their checks. I mean, just think about that in 2023. And this is not something that unions want. These are not something the employees want. They would much rather just do the job they were hired to do and get that money put into their account. So all of the obstacles that have been put in place or have been said to have been put in place about has to be the same payday, has to be the same pay period, false. It would make the process more efficient, for sure, and it would be, overall that's the goal, but that is not preventing us from implementing this. I can go on forever when it comes to this. Having email, actual email, not just a couple of email addresses for each department. I'm talking about actually computerizing, modernizing this town, and that part's going to take longer because direct deposit, online bill pay, are things that we're making priorities as soon as we can. Putting computers in, teaching people how to use these computers in the right way, in the safe way, that'll take more time. Being able to improve the communication with members of the town. So when you see a pothole, or more often than not, a sidewalk that is dangerous or broken, like I said, those Widowmaker branches that were overhanging the park, you can take a photo, right? And plenty of other towns and cities in Connecticut already have this. And you can email it or text it to the town or input it in an app. So there's actual accountability. Because right now, I've seen issues in the town that go unaddressed for years because it's a really inconvenient process to walk into town hall, fill out a form, and get that done. That should not be on the onus of the public. So I made a short answer long, but yes, this is an absolute priority. Should have been done decades ago, and the town council should have played a more active role. We still don't have Wi-Fi, public Wi-Fi in this room, as all of you are clearly aware. That is ridiculous. Thank you.
Vinny?
So yes, certainly we're going to look to make digital improvements and access to town hall better. Certainly we're going to have more digital communication and more digital access for the townspeople. Being criticized for not doing something that a town councilor can't do is really, it doesn't say anything other than you don't know how government runs. The fact of the matter is that the administration runs the daily operations of the town, makes decisions about things like what the website looks like. The town council cannot direct the administration. The charter doesn't allow the town council to do that. The town council sits in a budgeting and legislative role and you can't legislate the website into existence. So, to criticize a town councilor for something that a town councilor can't do other than making a political statement.
Thank you.
Really, thank you.
Ms. Rumani, would you ask your next question of Vinny?
Do you support continuing to pursue the Parks and Recreation Commission's plan for the community pool, or do you think it should be scaled down, or do you think it's a project that the town can't afford at all?
So, community pool is really an interesting issue for the town. When we looked at it 3 years ago, we were looking at a $7.5 million project, and that was before the COVID impact on the economy, and building supplies and that sort of stuff has become, I think it's still 40%, 30 to 40% more expensive than it was pre-COVID. So it's an expensive project. The information that I've gathered in looking at the pool in recent history, which, by the way, the last 3 times that the pool issue has been before the council, I have voted in favor of sending it out to bid. I don't think that we can continue to use the pool as the impoundment, as the paved pond. That's the biggest public pool, I don't know if it's in the world, but that's not something that's going to be sustainable. Additionally, the filtration system, the pumps, they're tremendous. They're the size of something I've never seen before, and I've had the opportunity to go through an inspection with them. You've got to be concerned that after that pool has sat for as long as it has, that if you put a new pump system in, that the pump system could then jeopardize the conduits and the other structures that handle the water. So I do think that the project that was proposed to us by the pool committee is probably going to be the one best considered. It's going to be a lot of money. It's something that, you know, when I have conversations with people about the pool, the majority of them say that they want to see community pool come back. There are a few people who tell me that, you know, they don't want to have community pool impact their taxes. But I think the way, you know, if the council will support this new pool project, I think the way to make it work is to examine what we do in terms of pass sales, to expand the hours, you know, to look at the user fee for the pool, you know, the pass fee, as something that can really support the ongoing cost of the pool. If you do that and you make it affordable for the town, then it certainly makes spending the money to do the improvement much more palatable. So I do think that the pool that we're going to see if we revisit Community Pool Park that way is going to be the pool that was proposed by the committee. Thank you.
Riley?
Well, I gotta say, if the whole politics thing doesn't work out, I hope my opponent considers a job in theater, because to reasonably, well, let's not act like some other folks here, but seriously, we're here to listen and talk about some important ideas, and the reality is that after multiple opportunities to put this pool back, when the vote actually mattered, to say to a straight face that you voted for it the last 3 times when they were resolutions or you were the last vote in the council so you knew it was already failing is hilarious. Right. Because the two votes where it did matter, and I know because I was fighting for this pool from day one, you voted against it. You were the tie-breaking vote against it. I could close my eyes and pick someone at random from this town, from this town hall today, to do that job of chairman over the last 10 years, and that would result in that pool being open today. And to say that you want to wait until prices go down, which is what the council said 3 years ago, prices don't go down. I know we have one history teacher tonight. That's not happening in American history.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Guzman, will you ask your next question of Riley?
In recent months, we have seen a rise in juvenile crime and car theft. If elected mayor, what specific steps would you take to address this issue?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, coincidentally enough, family that I knocked on the door of earlier this week told me about, not that many blocks from here actually, how they had 10 break-ins, 10 car break-ins on one street in one night. I believe this was this past Friday. It's a problem across the state, and Wallingford is not immune to it. In some ways, and this is one of the things that I will absolutely agree with Mr. Simone on, we are, generally speaking, a safe town. And in some ways, we've become a victim of our own success in that regard, and that we've become an easy target. And so in terms of how do we address a lot of these break-ins, we have to make sure that we're supporting our police force when it comes to the resources, the technology they need. I know one of the things that's been discussed about for years amongst our first responders is potentially having a service, a subscription like, I believe it's called Atlas One, that would allow them to communicate, not just amongst themselves and amongst the other town employees for when you have an emergency, where, you know, we have town employees spread out all over town. So being able to respond to emergencies quickly and get information quickly is critical, and also be able to communicate with the town. Again, these are things you want to be proactive about as opposed to reactive about. And it's about, I want to say $30,000 a year. When we're talking about safety, you know, it's pennies. I mean, safety is the most important responsibility, keeping this town safe. It's the single most important responsibility of anyone who sits in the mayor's seat come in January. When it comes to technology, and this is something we've seen other towns and cities across Connecticut, ones that are especially in similar circumstances as us, where a lot of these break-ins are usually near the highway entrances and exits, right? So you're getting folks coming into town who are then, whatever this break-in might be, whatever this theft might be, and then quickly leaving. And so what other towns have successfully implemented, whether usually it's license plate scanners, frankly, at the entrances and exits to these highways. So again, as opposed to getting there after the crime's been committed, or an additional crime can be committed, the police can be aware of where in the community might need their attention. Because, like I said, when I worked at the Department of Justice, it's a very different type of law enforcement, that's for sure, but it was from behind a desk. And I was able to be anywhere in the world. Most of my cases were international. I was able to do those cases because we had the technology to do so. And at my level in the Department of Justice, certainly technology was not a strong suit either, but it was much stronger than here is in town. And we've made strides. We've absolutely made strides under the current police department, but there's a long ways to go, and we need to make sure that we're giving these officers the ability to not only do their jobs as effectively as possible, but as safely as possible for them as well as the community. Thank you.
Vinny?
So if you're in tune and in conversation with the police department, you know that the police department has been way ahead of the rest of the administration when it comes to technology and their use of it. Every cruiser is a mobile command station, and we do have lots of technology that the police use. The problem with the crime that occurs today among juveniles is that the state has relaxed the penalties for juveniles. There's almost no penalty for juvenile crime, and so it reoccurs and reoccurs and reoccurs, and they don't get a penalty until they turn 18. So I would certainly lobby our legislators to change the laws, to improve what we can do to fight crime, to give the police legal tools that they can use to prevent these crimes from reoccurring. Thank you.
Ms. Sarkar, will you ask your next question of Vinny?
Touching upon the various industries and businesses within town, what resources can you provide for existing companies in town?
I'm sorry, can you read that again?
Touching upon the various industries and businesses within Wallingford, what resources can you provide to them in order to ensure increase in growth and commerce?
Thank you. So I have had the opportunity over the past 10 years to work with the Economic Development Commission. We do go on site visits. We do visit with existing business owners in town at their locations. We talk to them about what it is that they can, that we can do to make their business run better in this town. At a recent visit, we sat down with the business owner, and he pulled out the personal property declaration form. And it's still a piece of paper that you have to handwrite on, and that's the only thing that this town offers. I think it's very easy to make that an online PDF fillable form. That's a small thing that we can do, example of a thing that we can do. We can certainly increase the resources that we provide them, the opportunities to market the town, with them for their purposes. The majority of the business owners that we do visit with enjoy being here, and certainly small, closely held corporations, locally owned businesses have no interest in leaving this town. But in terms of recruiting some of the larger companies that we have here, like BYK, Ulbrich Steel is now a multinational company. I would work with those business owners to find out how it is that we continue to make this. This is a world-class town in terms of the businesses that we have here and that we support. So I would certainly talk to the operators of those large businesses and see what it is we can do to continue to make this town a place that they want to be, because having them here, having employers like that here, is great for the town as a whole. It's great for the tax base, and it's something that's very important. Thank you.
Riley?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and we have a lot of work to do. If you look at our grand list over the last 10 years, from 4.25 billion or so to 4.6 billion, looks great on paper. When you control it for inflation, which is 32% over that same period of time, Even a completely stagnant grand list would be worth $5.6 billion today if it was 4.25 10 years ago. So we are falling behind. The value of our grand list is shrinking. And a big part, the big way we can do that is just simply improving our communications with a lot of these industries and business owners in town. Great, we have an EDC, but again, without that, even as something as simple as an email list to communicate with all these businesses in an efficient and effective manner, when something like PPP money comes available, the small business owner, you're not expected to know the ins and outs of these opportunities. That's our job as administration. That's our job with having an EDC, a professionalized grant writer going forward, and those kind of things. So improving that communication so that we can start actually not only attracting the businesses to Wallingford, but making sure we retain the ones that are already here. Thank you.
Mr. Muni, will you ask your next question of Riley?
Piggybacking on the question of juvenile crime, do you believe that there are enough programs in town to keep youth busy? And would you support the construction of a community center to add to that?
That's a great question, and it's a big part of the problems we're facing here in Wallingford. I know I've mentioned this already, but it's important. Wallingford has had a 15% decline in young families, young people living in this town over the last 10 years. And there's a negative spiral effect to that, where programs have in some ways been eliminated. Part of that's the pandemic as well, I realize. But even local businesses that used to more so cater to young families, young people, are also gone at that same time. So when I was a kid, we had an after-school program after DAG where we'd go bowling at the bowling alley. Colony Lane's bowling alley is in rough shape these days. When my cousins were younger, we'd go to Sky Zone, which is also no longer here. So there are these, it's a negative spiral. It's a positive feedback loop that we need to get ourselves out of, because there's no way to fully eliminate ever juvenile crime. It's part of society at some level. But we can at least help the majority of these kids that are just being pulled along because they have nowhere else to go, give them a place to be, whether that's community pool, whether that's fixing up our parks so that that's an opportunity. I know it's batted around a lot every couple of years, whether or not we have a skate park. Whether or not that's the exact solution, something. These kids have nowhere to go. Some kids are biking down the road, and they're part of, again, like there's always gonna be troublemakers, but a lot of these kids are just following because they have nowhere else to be, nowhere else to go. And I think that's a real shame, because I know when I grew up in town, yes, there were still our problems, but there was always somewhere to be and something to do as a kid. And I think whether it's investing more in our park and rec programs that are, they have the foundation there, making sure we continue to support that, whether it's youth soccer, whether it's, how about we start by putting basketball hoops or basketball rims on the actual hoops. The number of basketball hoops I've seen in town that don't have rims on them, don't have nets whatsoever, what are we doing? I mean, why even have the court in the first place? That's the perfect thing for kids to hang out around and do that's productive and keeps them outside. I spoke to a gentleman who went out of his way, him and his young son, to go themselves purchase a rim, purchase the net, and install, he did it earlier this summer, install that onto a hoop at a public park here in town. Paid for himself, done completely himself. That's amazing. But we should not be requiring the community to do that level of maintenance. We need to play an active role as an administration as well. And that's something certainly that I'm vowing to do. Thank you.
Vinny?
Thank you. So our Youth and Social Services Bureau is located at the Rec Department at Fairfield Boulevard. Depending on what time of day you show up at the Rec Department at Fairfield Boulevard, you can see a whole lot of unused spaces. And I think that's essentially our youth center, the Rec Department. But Youth and Social Services is very good about taking on programs that address opportunities for children to do things. And I would consider exploring some type of transportation or shuttle from the downtown. That was one of the disappointments when I first moved here. The rec center was at the Simpson School location. And I think that if we can provide opportunities for kids downtown to get out to Fairfield Boulevard, that it will enhance the number of opportunities that they take advantage of there. But more is always better, and I would certainly support more programming for youth. Thank you.
Ms. Guzman, will you ask your next question of Vinny?
The town has been criticized for its lack of diversity in the workforce. Do you believe this is a problem? How would you address this criticism?
So that's an interesting question, and It's an interesting question to put onto government, you know, and I think having jobs attracts people. The question of how you attract diverse people is you know, it's up to the employer to really draw those. You're talking about employees that work for the town or that work for businesses in town?
For the town.
Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. So there are certainly federal standards that apply to you know, goals for diversity in employment. And I think that we certainly should work hard to make sure that we are providing opportunities for diversity in our employment. When we had that job fair, I did think that there was quite an amount of diversity in the room, both in terms of gender and race. And you know, I think it's about getting the message out, and it's about making sure that everybody knows that there are job opportunities here, irrespective of what your social background or otherwise is. And I would certainly support, as the administrator, making sure that we are marketing job opportunities as far and wide as possible to make sure that our diversity in the workforce does improve. You know, one of the challenges that we became very aware of when we were moving the police station out to Barnes Road from its current location at the Armory is that the locker facilities we have for female officers are incredibly inadequate. They're probably a third of what we should have for the number of female officers we have. So certainly moving the police station and allowing us to have appropriate facilities for female officers is going to help us hire more. But I think it's about how you market and encourage the hiring, and I will certainly absolutely support that. Thank you.
Riley?
Yeah, so we have to start by acknowledging it's an important question, but it's not an easy solution. And certainly the two white guys up here probably aren't the most qualified to speak on it. But I can say, having spoken to many people in town, you know, when I grew up in this town, it was far less diverse than it is today, and that's wonderful. That's incredible. And we've had a lot of value in the town as a result from that. We have to take that next step and actually make folks of all sorts feel welcome in this town, not just be here. You know, we've had mostly young generation, mostly student-led events over the last couple of years, whether it was an event for Pride Month by the town hall or event for the Stop Asian Hate rally, which had a great attendance. And I think it's a shame that we don't see many elected officials at these events, because these young people want to know, not just young people, their families want to know that they're welcome here, they're supported, and they're valued. So it doesn't solve all of our issues, but we actually have to at least acknowledge that these issues are out there. They're important to solve, because as our town diversifies, our leadership and our employees should too. Thank you.
Mr. DePasquale, will you ask your next question of Riley?
Where do you see Wallingford in 5 years? And what will you do during your tenure as mayor to help Wallingford obtain that vision?
Great question. And I think, frankly, it's a very different vision of Wallingford depending on how this election goes. You know, I try not to be pessimistic about it, but we're at a crossroads, right? Where we have an opportunity for a continuation of the same, which is not terrible, but it's a decline, it's stagnation, and it's slow, but it's consistent, it's gradual. Or we have an opportunity to actually address these issues responsibly, acknowledge them and face them head on. So I fear what Wallingford will look like in 5 years if change does not come. I really do, because I can't go anywhere. You know, this will always be my home. My family has been here for generations. You know, that's why I came back to Wallingford in the first place, because nothing will feel like home like Wallingford does. But we need to acknowledge that there's real challenges ahead. Should I be elected, should I be so fortunate to win the voter support this November 7th, I think Wallingford could be not a fundamentally different town, because the fundamentals are there, but a very different town all the same 5 years from now. Where especially what we're talking about in terms of technology, I mean, I want to say 5 years, because online bill pay and direct deposit, other than negotiating those factors with the unions, those can be implemented, at least, practically speaking, in the first 100 days. And that's something that I'm vowing to do. But really starting to address the critical infrastructure issues in this town. And I'll be honest, my platform is a 15-year infrastructure plan. 15 years is a long time. It's not 5. We'll make progress over the course of that 5. But that's how long it's going to take, because that's how long we've been asleep at the wheel, or at least this administration's been asleep at the wheel in terms of maintaining these public assets, whether it's the parks, the sidewalks, the town buildings. 5 years from now, at the very least, we will have community pool back open. Should I be elected, I'd love to say that we'll do everything in my power to get it open by the summer of 2025. The sidewalks, we have to fundamentally change how we plan around sidewalks. There's certain zones in town, because we go zone by zone with sidewalks, some zones haven't been touched in 40 years. That's way past the lifespan of a sidewalk. So bringing forward that 15-year plan to the town council and to the public in the first month of office is a priority of mine. So the public can give feedback, and so that ultimately, who knows what the future holds. You might have to adjust timelines here and there, adjust priorities, but at least there's a plan in place. Because right now, and for far too long, we've been flying completely blind. And so the Wallingford of 5 years from now is technologically competent, if not all the way there. Infrastructure is improving, and at least we have a plan for what the future, long-term future, can, should, and hopefully will look like. Thank you.
Vinny?
So I don't have 15 years to spend in this job. So those first 5 years are really important to me. This town has experienced $317 million in growth in the grand list over the past 10 years. And I want to see that continue. I think that's important. We need to look at repurposing possibly some of our office buildings that are never going to be office buildings again for something like light manufacturing. That'll help us grow the grand list. And then we are going to be aggressive about addressing the infrastructure in town. I think that within 5 years, I want to have gone through all of the town buildings to make sure that they are up to snuff and they're places where you can feel safe. And certainly the sidewalks, I do agree, we need to be aggressive about those, particularly in the downtown where they see more foot traffic and they take a beating in the winter. So I am optimistic about what the next 5 years will be, not pessimistic. Thank you.
Ms. Ramuni, will you ask your last question of Vinny?
At the start of the pandemic, the town offered Simpson Court to the restaurants in that area to provide for outdoor dining. And since then, it's become a popular gathering spot, and there's been calls for it to become permanent. Is that something you would support?
So yes, I have supported the outdoor dining that we've done downtown beyond just Simpson Court. During the pandemic, Chris Shortell, who was then a counselor, approached me about enhancing outdoor dining throughout the town, not just in Simpson Court. But the outdoor dining we have at Simpson Court certainly is a draw. Thursday nights, there's a DJ there. I think it's a tremendous draw to the downtown. I'd like to see it continue longer than it does. And the other thing that I would like to explore is maybe one weekend night during the summer, possibly closing North Main Street from Center Street up to Church Street, the whole thing, so that we can have a monthly or weekly downtown festival where people can walk freely around and dine outdoors and enjoy the summer in downtown Wallingford. I felt like when I first moved here that Wallingford got quiet in the summer because people wanted to be at the shoreline during the summer. And certainly over the past 10 years, I feel like people stay here during the summer because downtown has become a great place to be year-round. And with the increased dining outdoors downtown Simpson Court and the other places where you can dine outdoors, people are happy to stay here during the summer. So I will certainly continue to support that and see how it is that we can make it enjoyable and safe for everyone. Thank you.
Riley?
Yeah, so I'm fully in support of the outdoor dining. I'm there most Thursdays when DJ Roz is playing his music, and it's a fun time, and it really brings the community together. But I think we can keep going, right? I mean, I'd love to see it extended the time, but I've also totally open to the idea of it being a permanent fixture, right? To the extent that we have to start getting creative in terms of how we support our businesses in town. And this is a great opportunity that other towns, I know West Hartford's been used as an example in the past, do very successfully. The issue that always comes up is parking, and the reality is Wallingford does not have a lack of parking problem. To the extent that we always protect handicap parking, have enough parking ideally for seniors. I know there's been talks, which I fully support, to put veteran-only parking, something like that would be amazing. But there's always plenty of parking. Even for Celebrate Wallingford, you could park very close to where walking was. So I'm not worried about taking up some parking spots potentially to offer business opportunities to all businesses in town, not just the ones on Main Street. This is something that we could implement potentially in Yalesville and other parts of the town. I'd love to see happen. Thank you.
Ms. Guzman, will you ask your final question of Riley?
What do you think of the current amount of the city budget that is going to fund Wallingford Public Schools? Would you support an increase in education funding? Why or why not?
100%. 100%. It's the safest investment you can make. We're talking about investing in the future of this town. And sure, there's a philosophical element to that. There's a values element to that, which I think this is a town that values education, at least historically has. But it's also financial. The number one determining factor for the property values of a town in terms of how they fluctuate is based on the ranking of the schools. Because Connecticut's not the cheapest state to live in. I think we can all agree on that. But we have some of, if not some, and sometimes the best public schools in the country on average. And so when families come here, whether they're from Connecticut originally or not, one of the first things they look at, and this is again, this is something that I've spoken to real estate agents all over town about when we've had this really kind of mass migration out of Wallingford when it comes to young families. They look at the schools. And because there's easy highway access in this area, you could easily work in Hartford or you can work in New Haven and live in Wallingford where the schools historically were fantastic. They're not anymore. A lot of these young families that are leaving Wallingford, and I know several of them, they didn't move to Colorado or Texas or wherever. They're moving to North Haven. They're moving to Cheshire, to Southington, whose schools are thriving. And at the same time, their taxes are also trending in the opposite direction of ours. We used to have a dominant tax rate. These other towns are getting closer and closer to ours, and their schools are thriving. So you get out of it what you put into it. And it's very clear to me that we're not getting enough out of our schools. And you got to keep in mind, this is an exciting election for a variety of reasons. Not only will we have a new mayor, we have an opportunity for the first time, at least first time as far back as you could find, that one election would determine a new mayor and a new opportunity for a new chair of the town council and a new chair of the Board of Ed. And who sits in that Board of Ed is also going to be important, because as mayor, all I can do is set that funding, and they do need more, that is clear. But unless we elect the right people for those offices, you can't put good money after bad. It's not going to change enough. So making sure that we're putting students first, making sure that we're putting, when push comes to shove, we're protecting as many student-facing employment positions as possible, because we're recovering from a pandemic. I mean, a lot of these, I volunteer at the schools with my therapy dog, and a lot of these kids, especially that are coming out of the pandemic in these younger grades, they're amazing, but they're not as socially developed as they would normally have been under normal circumstances. So now is the time to invest in our schools, not divest, right? I mean, this is a make or break point. And certainly increasing the Board of Ed budget, not slashing it by nearly $3 million like it was by this council administration. Increasing that funding is a big important thing to me. Thank you.
Vinny?
So every year that I've sat on the council, the Board of Education budget has increased. And it is, in fact, the greatest driver of tax increases in this town. And by and large, I have supported the Board of Education budget increases. In fact, in 2015, there was a motion, the last night that the council was making adjustments to the budget, there was a motion to add another $500,000 to the Board of Education budget, and I was the swing vote that passed that $500,000 increase to the Board of Education budget. I do support education. I do believe it's vital. I do believe our schools are critical for sustaining the community and just for making the world a better place. It's important that when children leave our school system, they are good, productive people. And so I have certainly supported education in this town and will continue to do so.
Thank you. That concludes the question and answer portion of the program. Each candidate will now have 3 minutes to make a closing statement. Vinny, will you begin, please?
Thank you. Thank you to Wallingford Community Women, to Government TV, to our questioners here. You make this all happen. So no doubt some of you have seen Mr. O'Connell's recent mailer. It's about the size of a Rolling Stone magazine cover. And it says in a bright yellow corner, ethics investigation uncovers Cervoni reduced big donors' tax bill by more than $20,000. First, it implies that that was a unilateral thing that I could do, which is not true. Second of all, based upon the complaint filed by Alita Sella, the Democratic Town Committee Chair, the Board of Ethics reviewed the allegations of that, and they cleared me. They dismissed the complaint for a lack of probable cause. They also dismissed the complaint because it had been published, as was evidenced on Facebook and by Mr. O'Connell's recent mailer. This is my 9th election that I've participated in this town. I've never experienced that level of false personal scrutiny, and I can only hope that this is the last election where Wallingford sees that. And I hope my friends who are Democrats distance themselves from that kind of campaigning. My administration will address town services, will address digital payments, will address the website, we'll look at the infrastructure, we'll improve things, we'll have a 5-year plan to improve the downtown sidewalks, the roads, and the buildings in town. You're all here because you have an interest in this town and its future. You're members of the community and you feel passionate about it like I do. And I think that you understand that I want this town to continue to operate well. I know we have room for improvements and I will certainly look for those. I think during my 14 years on the town council, 10 years as chair, you've watched me listen to people. You watched the meeting that happened here when the high school parents showed up, their concern about what was going to happen to the two-school system. So I've valued public input and I will continue to do so. But I have an ability to address problems because I've been working with the administration for as long as I have. After 29 years in this town, I'm a huge fan. And as mayor, it is my plan to certainly be its biggest cheerleader, to bring people here, to keep people here, to bring businesses here, to keep businesses here, to do what it takes to keep this town as great as it has been and to improve it, to make it better for the years to come. Many of you live, work, and play here, and I want to make sure that this continues to be a great place where you live, work, and play, and I will look forward to your vote on November 7th. Thank you.
Riley?
Well, I really appreciate that Mr. Cervoni brought up the issue of integrity in this election when he had an opportunity just then, as I offered from the start, to correct anything incorrect that I have said. There was nothing. The reality is you cannot have a sitting elected official, let alone one running for the highest office in this town, voting, not using his position as chair, abusing his position of chair to vote in favor of reducing the tax bill of his biggest donor. I mean, just common sense. It's very clear. We talked a lot about experience tonight. 14 years in the council and nothing has been achieved. All the things that we've talked about, as a matter of fact, tonight have been actively voted against by Mr. Cervoni. Our town has declined in every metric over that period of time, whether it's taxes, our schools, you name it. And we've already hashed out many of these things, but one of the really frustrating things about trying to actually address these issues is my opponent's habit of saying one thing while doing the exact opposite, which has been on full display tonight. We talk about the pool, something that he actively killed twice. We talk about fixing infrastructure. He voted against even forming the committee that addresses and brings these issues to light. There is no other way. I mean, even talking about technology, like I said, we still don't have Wi-Fi in this room. His platform in every way contradicts his record. It would have been a more exciting debate tonight if Mr. Cervoni was debating against himself from 2 years ago than myself. There's a lot that needs to be done. And when it comes to integrity, again, I've already hashed out that issue, but there's a far bigger one. Earlier in this campaign, the Cervoni campaign falsely advertised a campaign fundraiser as an event to support veterans and first responders. That is absolutely true. As a matter of fact, and I've got the proof. The guy who's saying, one of the people saying it's not true is right here, but I mean, if you want me to. I'm happy to. Do you mind if I have another 15 seconds just to?
Just have time.
Thank you, appreciate it. No, it's okay. Not your fault at all. Look, the reality is, and Mr. Savoni's campaign manager and treasurer are here, and this is a post that's still online, claiming that he would donate every dollar raised, all proceeds to charity. Didn't donate a penny. It went straight into the pocket of his campaign. I mean, what are we even doing here tonight, honestly? We're talking about literally stealing hundreds, if not thousands of dollars from American heroes. And this is still a race somehow? I don't care if you're a Democrat, Republican, or independent. That is unacceptable and should disqualify anyone from running for office, let alone the highest office in this town. Yeah, there you go. Okay, everyone settle down.
There's 30 seconds left, please.
Yeah, thank you.
Thirty seconds remain, please.
Oh. Guys, I appreciate it, but it's not necessary. The reality is I want to be optimistic about what the future of Wallingford holds, because we do have a once-in-a-generation opportunity in front of us. But to be completely honest with you, I'm more afraid of what's going to happen if we fail, honestly. Because we're talking about, forget about if we fail with these abhorrent tactics for raising money, not only are we going to have a problem with the old boys club that's run this town to the ground continuing to persist, but they will be emboldened by the fact that once again, yet again, they have not been held accountable. That is terrifying on behalf of the town. If you're willing to do that to seize power, what will you do with that power? Unfortunately, this is an election about trust, and it's been broken.
Thank you. This concludes the mayoral segment of the 2023 Candidates Forum. On behalf of the Wallingford Community Women, I thank you for watching and remind you to vote on November 7th.